Welcome to another ETG session. This is a new segment on the School Site Corner where I highlight individuals who are out there grinding and achieving at a high level. And it's all in part to inspire those that are listening, to give them a sense of what it takes to reach that next level to actually achieve. And so today on the podcast, we have none other than Kristan Alewine. So, Kristan, if you would, just take a couple of seconds to tell us a little bit about who you are and what kind of success you've recently achieved.
Yeah, so like he said, I'm Kristan Alewine. I am currently an administrative assistant at Tanglewood Middle School. I've been here for 2 years. Before that, I was a fourth grade teacher at East North Street Academy and just recently got promoted to assistant principal here. And I'm super excited to be able to continue the work that we've started here. So was definitely looking from the AA position to be promoted. Was hoping that I would be able to stay here, and it worked out to be able to stay here at Tanglewood.
All right. And how long have you been at the current school that you're in right now?
So this is my second year. I started, one neat thing is I got to work with sixth grade last year and then moved up with them into seventh grade, and I'm planning to be in eighth grade with them next year. So it's been a really good experience to be able to stay with that same group of kids because they've gotten to know me, the parents know me, so it really builds that relationship and that consistency with those kids that in a Title I school sometimes they're lacking. So it's been a really neat experience.
Most definitely. And you kind of talked about a little bit about, I guess, the journey of your teaching career, but being an AP, an assistant principal, for those that aren't used to the lingo, being an assistant principal is one that doesn't happen overnight. So you started out in the classroom, and that's actually how I know you. You are a good friend of my wife's, and we've hung out a few times, just friends and everything. So could you kind of explain your journey and the path that you took to actually get to where you're at today to move into this assistant principal position?
Yeah, so I grew up in Greenville County. Always said that I wasn't going to become a teacher because both my parents are in education, and they were like, you know what it is, that it's not this 180 days and then you have a summer. I mean, they went so far as to say, like, we're not going to pay for your education if you go into education because, like, you know what it is. And then really getting into senior year of high school, it just was like, that's all I want to do. Like, I want to teach. So I went to Clemson, got a 4-year degree in elementary education. And honestly, the first year out, there was a teacher shortage, which is kind of funny to look now. We can't find teachers, but 11 years ago, I mean, there were no jobs. And so I actually subbed for a year, which I really think was probably the biggest blessing, just because I got to see different schools in Greenville County. I subbed some in Anderson and Spartanburg County. So really kind of got a feel of where I wanted to be, and fell in love with Title I schools, just because I saw the disparity that there was. Even though I'm in a big county, there are certain things that aren't necessarily equal in every school. And so I actually subbed in a 5th grade class at East North Street and thought, sorry.
You getting kicked out?
Yeah, except for me.
Okay.
He knows that I'm in here, so.
Perks of.
But yeah, so I subbed in a 5th grade class, and I was like, God, these kids are crazy. Like, I don't think I could be at this school. And then 3 days before school, well, before teachers were reporting back in 2011, I got a call from the principal at East North Street, and she was like, hey, we just had a teacher that had to leave. We want you to come and work here. And I was like, I have 3 days. Like, what do you know? Like, I can't. She was like, no, if anybody can do it, you can do it. Like, and so to me, that was such a God thing of like, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm gonna sub for another year. Like, I'm not gonna get a position. And I mean, overnight, had to get the classroom ready. There was no time to even think about fear. Like, it was just straight into it. So I taught for 4 years before I went back and got my master's. Just really had a passion to be able to affect change at a bigger level. I loved being able to work with my kids, but I just thought I want to have a bigger impact. And so one thing that people always said is like, why do you want to leave the classroom? And I've always said administration isn't leaving the classroom, it's entering more classrooms. So it's not that you're no longer in one classroom, but you have a broader range of reaching kids. And so in my mind, I was like, I'm going to went back to Clemson, got my degree in administration. And I was like, this is going to be easy. Like, I'm going to go apply. That's it. That was not it. So I probably applied. I had a list at one point. I think it was like over 60 places that I applied to, went through 21 interviews, made top 2 6 times, did district interviews, and it just, doors kept closing. And I was just like, I don't understand. Like, what is it? And so it was weird. So then in spring of 2019, I applied at Tanglewood. And for anybody in the community that knows, and those of you that don't know, Tanglewood is probably one of the roughest schools in Greenville County. And so it has a stigma of having those kids and that school. And so a lot of people were like, why are you applying? Like, why would you want to go there?
Sure.
And, I was like, for that reason, because that's how you're viewing the school and the kids. And so I actually applied. What all they had at the time was an AP position. And I was like, I'm not going to get that without going through the administrative assistant role. But went through that interview, was like 3 weeks of not hearing anything, and was like, okay, I guess that didn't go over either. And then the principal at the time called me and was like, hey, we don't have an AP job anymore. And I was like, why are you calling then? And he was like, but we do have an administrative assistant position. Would you be interested in that? And I was like, yes, like that'd be awesome. So it was definitely a humbling process to get where I was.
And you said 60 interview or 60, kind of like compiled a list of 60 different places.
60 schools.
That's quite, I would say, impressive. And that's nothing less than like dedication, like just to sit down and put that together. And so you have talked about all of these ways that you've been relentless, and you get turned down from multiples. How do you keep going? Like, what's the mindset that you have that pushed you through all of these different obstacles that you faced along your journey or in your journey to the place to where you're at now? What kind of mindset would you say, maybe it's multiple mindsets, but what sort of mindsets have you embraced to bring you to where you're at right now?
I think the biggest thing for me is just knowing that I was where I was for a reason. And so as much as I may have thought, my time here is done, it wasn't. There was a reason that I needed to stay in the classroom longer, or that I didn't get a particular school. And I would just say the biggest thing for me was having a good support system. So, like I said, my parents both were educators. They both, were great supports. I have several friends, your wife included, just, that were like, no, like, you got to keep grinding, you got to keep going, you got to keep going. And so I think reflection and growth and learning and taking time, every interview I had, I would go back to whoever interviewed me or the team and say, in what ways can I grow? In what ways, what did you not see in me that you saw in another candidate? What was it, that maybe I didn't have, or I could do different, or whatever. And sometimes, it was simply like, one person said, we really needed a male in our school. And that's not something you can change. But another one was, if you took more time and learned scheduling, that would be something great. If you took more time and worked in something else. And so then it just became this thing of, okay, well, I'm just going to keep pushing, and whatever they say, I'm going to get better at. So then once I came to that Tanglewood interview, there really wasn't a question that I wasn't ready for, because I'd taken those other 19, 20 interviews, because I actually had like 3 interviews that week that I interviewed at Tanglewood. And so like, I was, trying to figure out like, okay, I've gotten better at this. I can present this, I can do that. So it's just kind of that relentless mindset of like, yeah, I'm going to be growth mindset. I'm going to keep pushing.
Perfect. And you said the best word, relentless. but it also takes a certain kind of fearless mindset to get turned down and then go to that person and ask, like, what kind of things are holding me back, asking for that feedback. And you were very receptive to it, to where I call it getting reps, to where you just get practice, go in, try something different, learn from the last experience, and make new with it with the next experience. So you're definitely relentless in that point. Now, you mentioned a couple of these mindsets, of support system definitely being a big piece of it, but also being relentless. This is one avenue. You making this or becoming an assistant principal is one avenue of your life. And what I've noticed with people that are successful or that achieve at high levels, it's not just one area of their life that they make these gains in. So having this mindset within you, what other areas of your life do you see this grind, if you will, showing through?
I think for me too, another thing, and your wife can attest to this because we're accountability for that, is getting, I don't know, I always say that I'm not somebody that goes on a diet or whatever, that it's more of a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah.
But right before I actually started teaching back in 2010, I decided, I was like, you know what, like I gotta get like, I had several friends that got married and I was looking back at pictures and I was like, this doesn't work. Like I can't do this anymore. So between summer of 2010 and like, I guess that next spring of 2011, I lost like over 75 pounds. And
Wow.
so it was just like, and so that's always been a thing for me. Now, I tell people all the time, like, I found and lost some of them again. Like, I'm not, there, but it's just that mindset of like, no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to accomplish this goal. I'm going to be accountable. There's no excuses. I mean, like, even like today, it's like, after this, like I'm going to the gym. Like that's just part of the routine. And I think it's easy to get out of that routine, but I think that self-discipline is so important. And until I think both in my career and personal life, until I make that decision that I want to do it for me, it doesn't get done. So you
Mhm.
can't do it for anybody else.
That makes sense. The internal drive.
Hmm.
Okay. Something that I think about, and obviously everyone has their problems and things that they go through, but the term adversity is inevitable. I think about that a lot because we all go through certain things. Me personally, and I spoke on the previous episode about how I've sent my focus and how I'm grinding with my family, finances, my health and fitness, but also with my business. And so you gave me some insight into your grind with your health and fitness. But understanding that and understanding that, everyone has their own difficulties and that adversity is inevitable. What sort of strategies would you give to a parent per se? Because you work with a lot of parents. Maybe a parent has some difficulties with their kid academically or behaviorally. What sort of strategies might you shine on them so that they can, move beyond some of these obstacles they're faced with?
I think for us, especially at Tanglewood, we use the it takes a village mentality. And we have, parents that parents is a broad term for us. So, I mean, in today's society, you don't necessarily know who the parental figure is or if it's guardianship or whatever. And I've told a lot of parents, you got to leave your pride at the door. Like, we're all here to see your child be successful. So don't be afraid to ask for help.
Hmm.
I think a lot of parents think that they need to do it on their own. But there's there's certain people that kids are going to connect with, or there's resources that we can get parents involved with. We have school counselors that can do stuff. We have mental health counselors. And I know, especially for some of our kids in the Hispanic and Black community, a lot of times mental health is not something that they really want to talk about. And so kind of breaking those barriers of it's not a bad thing. And, I've had conversations with parents saying like, if they had a broken leg, you would take them to the doctor. You wouldn't just say, oh no, it'll heal on its own. It's fine. So really having that conversation to where they understand that it's okay. And I mean, I tell parents all the time, I said, I go and see a therapist. And I
Mm.
think having that transparency too, because a lot of times they think like, oh yeah, you're just saying this, but you're not practicing it.
Yeah.
And then just, I mean, community resources, like linking them up with Upstate Circle of Friends or somebody at United Way, or we have community in schools. There's a lot of resources that I think our parents aren't aware of. So just being that resource for them, or if knowing they're going home, and nobody's at home, here's an after school program. We have transportation, like we'll get them home. If they don't understand, I know a lot of parents, even when I taught fourth grade, they were like, we don't understand this math. Like we can't help them, and now the math is getting harder and they're like, we don't know. So finding a resource of, hey, this math teacher stays on these days or whatever, but just finding those resources for them and knowing that they're not in it alone, I think is really helpful. But you also have to, in order for them to get to that point with you, there's also got to be that relationship already.
Most definitely.
So I think, especially for our parents, like I make a concerted effort to call home for any and everything. So a lot of times if parents see a school number, they're not going to want to answer, and they'll be surprised if I call them and say, hey, so-and-so like had an awesome day today. They're like, wait, what? They did something good? Like what
Yeah,
what else
positive
did they
phone
do?
call. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, it just flips that whole conversation. So I'm like, yeah, so now when you see my number, don't be hesitant of like, oh, what they do now or whatever. And I think when they see that as educators, we're in this with them, that it's not us versus them, it's us versus the problem. Like we are doing this together to solve this together, then that real conversation and change can start.
I like that. Now, with you giving parents some of these resourcefulness and things in the community, that's great that you guys have that. Are there common trends or threads that you hear from parents as far as like their obstacles? Sure, they may have specific things with their kids, but are there like overlapping, themes of like, this is a challenge?
I think one huge thing has been just cell phone use in general.
Okay.
So for our kids, I mean, it's a struggle during the school day, at night, and it's just there's no way for our kids to unplug ever, because a lot of parents that I have, they're my age, maybe 5-10 years older, and so we reflect back on when we were in school, we didn't really have cell phones like that. So there wasn't the automatic, oh, I can send this on Snap or I can send this on Instagram, and then it's just our kids can't get away from it. So we've seen an increase in bullying because of cell phones, because there's just no time ever for them to unplug. When I was at middle school, there was drama, but then you went home and you didn't with it till the next day, or on the weekends you were free of that. And so it's trying to figure that out it's hard for any of us to navigate. And I wouldn't say that we really have an answer, unfortunately, right now to that, because so many of the kids have cell phones for safety reasons.
Sure.
Because we'll have moms that will just say, well, I'm just going to take it away. And I'm like, well, if they ride the bus and you work late, like that's, because there's not house phones anymore. So It's like they need that. So I would say that's really been an issue that I would like to see the community try to gather around to see
like
what
maybe some kind of restrictions around the cell phone, or discipline around using it, because they're around to stay. And so it's like, let's use them to our advantage, but not necessarily become zombies and consumed by them to where, they're impacting our day-to-day functioning.
Exactly.
Understood. Cell phones, that's good. So, do want to be respectful of your time, and I thank you for taking this time out. But looking forward, I know that being assistant principal is something that you've worked your way up to. Do you have any new things that are on the horizon as far as like in the future that you see yourself grinding towards that you could kind of let us in on?
So one thing that I've been going back and forth with for a long time is getting my doctorate. Is just a very daunting task, but my goal, ultimately, I would love to work at the district level and do some sort of superintendency. So in order to do that, it's going to require a doctorate. So I've been looking at programs, but I'm also one that's very financially savvy too. So trying to figure out what that looks like to not go too far in debt.
Of course.
And then to figure out, okay, just sanity wise, we have several people in our building that have doctorates or working on them, and so I think a lot of them, when you talk to them, they're like, don't do it, but then do it. So I think figuring out too, the biggest thing is what I would want to actually do my dissertation on, which is what's holding me back. Because if I'm going to put that much work into something, I want my research to be on something that's impactful, that like I'm passionate about. So that's kind of where my holdup is now. I've have applications in at 3 different schools.
I know
But
you're
it's
great at those, right?
right. I can submit an application. Yes, sir. But really just trying to narrow down that dissertation work, which I would still have some time to do, but
For sure.
before I really push that final envelope.
Okay. Well, I will definitely keep an ear out to kind of see how things are progressing. Obviously, take the time to fill out this assistant principal role. It sounds like something you've been doing, but kind of embracing it as it is right now. And so, is there anything else that you'd like to share with the audience before we get out of here today?
I don't think so, but I appreciate you having me so much.
Yes, most definitely. Well, I do want to thank you. And until next time, take care, you guys.